it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. Good evening, wanderers of the late hour, and welcome to a place the light avoids. As ever, I'll be your guide as we step quietly beyond the threshold into a world where safety is an illusion and survival comes at a terrible cost. Out here, the ordinary becomes unrecognizable, and silence itself feels like it's watching you breathe. Before we go any further, take a moment. Close the curtains, still your phone, listen. Tonight's story isn't about monsters pounding at the door. It's about what happens when the door is sealed. The world ends without you, and the only thing left to contend with is time and yourself. High above the streets, one man clings to life in a place never meant to be a refuge. Hunger becomes routine. Isolation reshapes the mind. When human voices finally return, they bring something far more dangerous than relief. Trust is scarce, mercy has conditions, and hope, if it exists at all, demands transformation. If you're ready to explore what survival really means when the world has already died, when being alive is no longer enough, then stay with me. The bells are silent, the dead are restless, and our story is just beginning. I survived the zombie apocalypse alone in a Wyoming bell tower, where Augustus Cordoba. Prologue. I came to Sheridan because it was supposed to be quiet. That was a lie I told myself anyway. Sheridan, Wyoming, just over 18,000 people on a good day, tucked up against the big horns like it was hiding from the rest of the world. Brick storefronts downtown, wide streets, pickup trucks parked crooked, and a skyline that never really rose above grain silos and church spires. The kind of place people pass through on the way to somewhere else. The kind of place where nothing big ever happened. Well, until it did. The Holy Name Catholic Church at a few blocks off Main Street, its bell tower rising above the low roofs like a finger pointed at the sky. Tan stone, narrow windows, old-world stubbornness baked into the walls. You could hear those bells all over town when they rang. Weddings, funerals, Sunday mornings. I'd noticed them the first day I arrived, standing outside a diner with a bad cup of coffee, listening to the sound roll across the streets and thinking how solid it all felt. Like history had weight here. As though things endured. When everything fell apart, people ran toward what they recognized. Familiar buildings, familiar symbols. Hospitals, schools, churches. And Sheridan was no different. By the time the sirens stopped and the screaming started, the streets around Holy Name were already clogged with abandoned cars and bodies that hadn't figured out yet that they were dead. Didn't plan to end up there. Just kept moving, following stone walls and instinct. Until the bell tower was the only place left that still went up instead of out. That's how I ended up climbing for my life, hands slick with blood that wasn't mine, the sound of the town dying beneath my boots. Part 1. I hauled myself up, the final steps, and the trapdoor crashed shut under my boots. The impact echoed throughout the tower. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Took 3 tries to drag the iron bolt into place. The metal was ancient and eaten through with rust, but it slid home and caught, and for now it held. The bell tower was tighter than I'd imagined, maybe 12 feet across. The walls were thick, rough-cut stone, heavy enough to smother most of the noise from below. The screaming didn't disappear completely. It came through as dull, strangled sounds. Claws scraping wood, fists slamming, the occasional wet, solid thump of bodies hurling themselves at the door at the base of the spiral stairs. I sank down with my back against the wall and tried to breathe. God, my chest burned like I'd inhaled fire. There was blood smeared across my jacket, dark and tacky. I didn't think it was mine. My right ankle pulsed with pain where I'd rolled it jumping from the cemetery wall. God, that felt like a lifetime ago. In reality, it had maybe been 20 minutes. The backpack I'd snatched from the parish office sat beside me. Still hadn't opened it. My phone was dead. The battery had given up while I was running. I watched the screen fade to black as I tore across the parking lot with those things gaining on me. No calls, no texts, no way to know if anyone else got out. I forced myself upright. God, my legs felt hollow, like they'd collapse if I trusted them too much. But I needed a clear look. The tower had 4 narrow windows, one facing each direction, tall slits framed by stone arches that sharpened into Gothic points. There was no glass, just open air and rusted iron bars set deep into the masonry. The bars were decorative, twisted into crosses and fleur-de-lis shapes. They might have slowed a climber, but they wouldn't stop one. Not that it mattered. God, I was roughly 80 feet up, and the exterior stone was smooth and unforgiving. No cracks, no handholds. Above me hung the bells. 2 massive bronze monsters suspended from a wooden frame that looked original, dark with age and stress fractures. Late 1800s, if I had to guess. I'd read the historical plaque once, back when this place meant something else. Well, cut that thought off hard. Time to focus. The bells were dead silent. Thick hemp ropes ran from their mechanisms down to the holes in the floor, coated in dust and rot. No one had pulled them in decades. Well, St. Catherine's had switched to recorded chimes years back. Cheap speakers and digital schedules. These bells were basically just museum pieces now. The floor was old wood planking, wide boards warped by time and moisture. Pigeon droppings covered everything. Feathers stuck to the corners. Damn, the smell hit hard. It was sharp. Ammonia, rot, old timber, powdered stone. A ladder leaned against the wall, leading to a hatch in the ceiling. I climbed it and shoved the hatch open. Wind slammed into my face, raw and icy. The November cold sliced straight through my jacket and into my bones. And as for the roof, well, it was slate, steep and slick, angled enough to kill me if I slipped. A narrow widow's walk wrapped around the base of the spire, a 2-foot ledge and a thin metal railing that didn't inspire confidence. The spire itself rose another 20 feet above that, ending in a copper cross eaten green by decades of weather. Well, from up there, I could see everything. Sheridan spread out below like a broken model town. Main Street lay open and gutted. I spotted the post office, the elementary school. Smoke curled up from at least 3 different buildings. Cars sat abandoned in the roads, doors flung wide, some still running themselves dry. And there were the people, except they weren't really people anymore. God, they were everywhere. Dozens I could count from the tower, maybe hundreds across the whole town. Some wandered aimlessly, dragging their feet in that wrong, jerky shuffle. Others stood frozen where they'd stopped, twitching like damaged machines stuck mid-loop. A few clustered tightly around something I couldn't see from this angle. Feeding, most likely. I just turned away from the edge then. The church grounds below were choked with them. Damn, they packed the parking lot shoulder to shoulder, bodies crushed together, spilling right up against the stone walls. I counted at least 40 clustered around the base of the tower alone, probably more, hidden where I couldn't see. And some of them were staring up at me. Their heads were tipped back, jaws hanging slack, faces smeared dark down the chest like they'd been bathing in blood. And even from this high I could see it. One of them had been Father Val. I recognized the black clerical shirt, the white collar still hanging in place, even though most of his throat had been torn away. I dropped back through the hatch and slammed it shut. My hands were shaking again, worse this time. Right, the backpack. I needed to stop spiraling and inventory what I had. I unzipped it and dumped everything onto the floorboards. 1 plastic bottle of water, maybe 16 ounces, tiny bag of vending machine pretzels, a flashlight. When I clicked it on, it coughed out a weak yellow beam. Oh, the batteries were already dying. A bare bones first aid kit, bandages, gauze, nothing serious. A box of matches, a small notepad and a pen. And that was it. God, this was Father Val's emergency bag stashed in his office. Emergency for what? Fucking losing power during Sunday Mass? None of this would keep me alive for 3 days. I sat back down and forced my breathing to slow. Oh, the water came first. 1 bottle wouldn't last long and my mouth was already dry from running. Damn, my throat felt raw like sandpaper. There was no water source up here. No pipes, no tanks. When this bottle was empty, I was finished. Food came next. The pretzels were maybe 200 calories on a good day. And after that, nothing. Oh, my stomach cramped, but I couldn't tell if it was hunger or fear chewing through me on the inside. The first aid kit only mattered if I was hurt worse than I thought. I checked myself properly this time. The blood on my jacket wasn't mine. I remember grabbing Mrs. Chen when she fell. Remembered too late that she was already gone. My ankle was swollen but still solid. Not broken, just angry. My palms were scraped raw from the wall. Painful but manageable. I had a light until the flashlight died. I had fire with the matches, but nothing worth burning except the ladder and the floor. I wasn't ready to go there yet. The notepad and pen were useless unless I decided to write a goodbye message. I was trapped in a stone tower 80 feet above the ground with less than a day's worth of supplies and no exit. Fuck, I should have kept running. I should have pushed for the highway, tried to flag someone down, anything. But the infected were everywhere, spilling out of houses, stores, alleys. The church had been right there, doors wide open. God, I hadn't thought, I'd just run. Now I was boxed in. The scraping below never stopped. It was still at the heavy oak door at the bottom of the tower, the one that led into the spiral staircase. I'd locked it behind me before I climbed, but didn't know how long it would last. The door was old, thick, really solid, built like something that was meant to survive centuries, and the frame was stone. But, god damn it, there were so many of them. I crawled over to the trap door and pressed my ear against it. The wood muted the sound, but I could hear them anyway. Moaning, wet and broken. That gurgling sound they made, feet dragging on stone, circling the tight spiral again and again. Oh, fuck, they were climbing. The bolt was all that stood between them and me. One piece of rusted iron and an old slab of wood. If they figured out how they could smash through it, or if that bolt failed... I scanned the tower for anything I could use. The ladder. I dragged it across the floor and jammed it diagonally over the trap door, one end braced hard against the opposite wall. Wasn't much, barely even a plan. But if they pushed from below, the ladder would bite into the stone and help keep the door closed. Probably. My watch read 3:47 p.m., Thursday, November 14th. I knew the date because I had a dentist appointment the next morning, something I'd been dreading for weeks. Funny what the mind clings to when everything else is burning down. The sun was already sinking, slipping behind the western hills. Got dark early this time of year. Maybe an hour of usable daylight left, then a brief grey fade, then full blackout. The flashlight wouldn't survive the night. If I was going to last, I had to get organized while I could still see. I picked the corner farthest from the trap door. It felt marginally safer. I shoved pigeon droppings and feathers aside with my shoe and cleared a space about 4 feet square. This was mine now. I dropped the backpack there and laid everything out in a pattern I could remember by touch. Water bottle, pretzels, first aid kit, matches, flashlight, notepad, pen. Well, loose wood was everywhere. Old planks, splintered pieces from the bell frame, wedges and shims left behind by repairs no one had finished. I gathered what I could and stacked it nearby. Could be fuel, could be a weapon, maybe both. I found a length of iron chain, rusted but dense and heavy, and set that within reach. Oh, and up close, the bells were enormous. Bronze skins dulled to a green-brown crust, etched with Latin that had faded with the light. Sancta Catarina, ora pro nobis. St. Catherine, pray for us. Inside each bell hung a massive iron clapper, thick as a limb, suspended and waiting. The ropes vanished down through holes in the floor, running all the way to the base of the tower. A thought crept in. If I pulled the ropes, the bells would ring. Not a little, God, no, it would be thunder. Sound that would carry for miles. Every infected thing in earshot would come running. But they were already here, swarming the building. What difference would it make? unless it could be used as a lure. Draw them to one side, then do what? Scale the outside of the tower barehanded? 80 feet of smooth stone, no rope, no harness. No, I wasn't a climber. I'd fall and die, or fall and shatter myself and die slower. Nope, the bells were a terrible idea. Noise was death. Silence was survival. The sun was touching the hills now. I moved to the north window and looked out. Fires burned in the distance, orange against the bruised sky. The strip mall past the highway was fully involved. Could see it clearly from here, flames punching through the roof of the Walmart on Coffin Avenue. No engines, no sirens, nothing fighting it, just fire eating whatever it found. Below in the church parking lot, the infected was still there. And something was different. They weren't all packed against the building anymore. Some had drifted off. I counted maybe 20 now instead of 40. They were spreading out, peeling away like ants that had lost the trail. Searching maybe, hunting for easier targets. One of them wore a Hetty's pizza delivery uniform from over on Broadway. Red shirt, black cap. Couldn't have been older than 19. His skin had gone grey, his jaw hung crooked and loose, but his name tag was still pinned to his chest. Tyler. I watched him shuffle across the lot, arms dangling uselessly, following a woman in a blue dress. She was missing her left arm below the elbow. Neither of them seemed to notice. I turned away. The temperature was dropping fast. I could feel it settling into the stone. November in Wyoming meant cold nights, and this tower was nothing but exposed rock and open air. No insulation, no heat. The wind slid straight through the empty windows. Fuck. I was going to freeze up here. My jacket was a thin windbreaker, useless against real cold. Jeans, sneakers, that was it. I was already shivering and the sun hadn't even finished setting yet. I searched the tower again, more carefully this time. There was nothing. No blankets, no tarps, no forgotten maintenance gear. Just stone, wood, dust, and the ghost mess left behind by birds. The pigeons were gone now. They'd exploded out of the tower when I slammed the hatch earlier, wings beating in panic. But their nests remained, packed into the rafters, built from sticks, feathers, and bits of trash scavenged from a town that no longer mattered. I climbed the ladder and tore down an armful of nesting junk. It was foul. Sticks slick with droppings, clumps of feathers matted together, bits of trash woven through it. But it was something. I dragged it back to my corner and shaped it into a rough mat. If I curled into it, maybe the feathers would trap some heat. Well, this was my life now, sleeping in pigeon nests. Part 2. Well, dark humor kicked in before I could stop it. I laughed once, a short, ugly sound that cracked off the stone walls. It had echoed for a long time. It was hollow. I shut it fast because it was one step away from sobbing. The light was almost gone now. I flicked on the flashlight and instantly regretted it. The beam was weak, sickly yellow, barely pushing back the shadows. I couldn't waste the batteries, so I shut it off and let my eyes struggle through the last scraps of twilight. A blue darkness seeped into the tower. The bells above became looming silhouettes. The windows turned into faint grey shapes, holding the final smear of sunset. The stars started to punch through. Venus hung low in the west, bright and steady. That dragged up memories that I hadn't asked for. My dad standing in the backyard with his old telescope pointing out constellations when I was a kid. Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper. He died 6 years ago. Heart attack at 58. I was glad he wasn't here to see this. My mum had moved to Nebraska 3 years back to be closer to my sister. Damn, I hope they were okay. I hope Nebraska was far away enough for whatever this had become. Didn't even know what this was, to be honest. The news had been a mess before the TV died. Violence, riots, something about rabies, emergency declarations, martial law. and then the power cut out around noon. My phone lost signal not long after that. Been standing in my kitchen debating whether to try to drive out of town when I heard screaming next door. Mr. Lopez staggered out of his front door covered in blood. He just stood there for a second, swaying, looking confused. Then Mrs. Lopez stumbled after him, her throat ripped open. I watched through my kitchen window as she caught him and they both went down hard in the driveway. Oof, I couldn't look away, but I should have. When they stood back up a few minutes later, I knew it was time to run. I grabbed my keys and the backpack from the hall closet, the one I'd owned, not Father Val's, and bolted from my car. I didn't make it. The street was already crawling. They poured out of houses, stepped from behind parked cars, spilled in from the park at the end of the block. I turned and ran the other way, toward Main Street, thinking there'd be police, soldiers, anyone. There was nobody. Just more of them. The church was the last option. The doors were open. Father Val must have unlocked them, maybe thinking he was offering sanctuary. I sprinted inside. The nave was empty. Crashing and screaming came from the administrative wing. I didn't check. Just saw the door to the bell tower stairwell and took it, slammed it shut, locked it and climbed. Well, that really only been 3 hours ago, maybe 4. Felt like days. The tower was fully dark now. Couldn't see my hand in front of my face. The noise from below had died down. They were still there. I could hear the occasional scrape, a dull thud, a low moan, but the constant pressure had stopped. Maybe they'd slept. Did they sleep? I had no idea. Nobody did. This was day 1 of the end of the world, and there was no handbook. My mouth felt like sandpaper, so I allowed myself 3 small sips of water. The liquid was warm and tasted like plastic, but it eased the burn in my throat. I tightened the cap and put the bottle back in the exact spot where I could find it without light. Didn't eat the pretzels. No, they had to last. Hunger was just discomfort. I could live with discomfort. Oh, the cold was worse. I was shivering non-stop now, my teeth clicking. I crawled into the pile of nesting material and curled up, knees tight to my chest. Well, the feathers helped a little, trapping what heat I had. God, it was miserable, but better than bare stone. Try not to think about my bed. Oh, the memory foam mattress, the electric blankets, the down comforter, the warm, soft place I'd probably never see again. No, come on, stop, don't spiral. I focused on breathing, in through my nose, out through my mouth, slow and controlled. This was survival. I'd read about survival. People lasted weeks without food, days without water. The human body was tougher than it felt. Come on, I could do this. I just had to make it to morning. Then I could reassess. Maybe help would come. Maybe the military would roll in and clear the town. Maybe this was contained. Maybe the rest of the country was still intact and rescue was already moving. Above me through the narrow windows, the stars burned cold and brilliant. The Milky Way cut across the sky like a pale scar, visible now that the town's lights were dead. Every streetlight was dark. Houses lay black and hollow, except where flames chewed through them. The stars burned brighter than I'd ever seen, to be honest, clear and sharp and merciless. It was beautiful in a way that made my stomach twist. I closed my eyes and tried to sleep. But the cold dragged me back up, or maybe it was the noise, I couldn't tell. Time meant nothing up here. My watch face was useless without the flashlight. I wasn't wasting the battery. The stars had shifted, though. Orion had climbed higher, which meant hours had passed. 10 p.m. maybe. Midnight, maybe later. The sounds from below were different now. Not the wandering shuffles. Not the broken moans. No, this was heavier. It was rhythmic and intentional. I sat up straight, wide awake, my heart slamming against my ribs. They were hitting the door at the bottom of the stairwell, again and again. This wasn't frantic, it wasn't random, no. A steady pulse like a battering ram. The noise rolled up the spiral stairs and punched through the trap door. I crawled across the floor and pressed my ear to the wood. It was louder there, clearer. Between the impacts I could hear voices. Not words, just layered sounds rising and falling together. Then a shared moan and another coordinated slam. They weren't just mindless. They were working together. And they were learning. The door would hold. It had to. Thick oak reinforced with iron sunk into a stone frame, built centuries ago by people who expected violence. But the frame worried me more than the door. Yes, old mortar, old stone, and the hinges on my side of the door. That meant they were pulling, not pushing. If they tore hard enough, the hinges could rip straight out of the wood. Right, I needed to think, needed to assume the door would fail. The ladder bracing the trapdoor suddenly felt laughable. I scrambled around for anything heavier, anything solid. I dragged over chunks of broken wood, old beams, thick planks, and stacked them on top of the trapdoor. It wasn't much, maybe 50 pounds total. It was all I had. The chain. I grabbed it, turned it over in my hands, and then stopped. There was nothing to anchor it to. The bell frame was wood, old and stressed. I didn't trust it to take that kind of load. The stone walls were bare, no hooks, no rings, nothing. My breathing sped up, sharp and shallow, and my fingers tingled. Right. Slow down. Forced the air back into my lungs and counted the breaths. I went to the west window and looked down. Fuck. The parking lot was worse than before, way worse. The crowd had thickened. They'd come back, drawn by the noise, or by memory, or by whatever passed for instinct now. Counted at least 60 near the church, and more were staggering in from the street, drawn out of the dark. Shit, this was spiraling fast. I climbed to the roof hatch and pushed it open. The night air hit me like a punch. My breath fogged instantly. The widow's walk glistened with frost. It was slick now and dangerous. Could I hide up here? If they broke through, could I climb out and wait it out? No, it was already below freezing. I was shaking uncontrollably in my thin jacket, even with the nesting material. Up there, exposed to the wind, I wouldn't last an hour. There was nowhere to go. The roof was too steep. The widow's walk went nowhere. The spire was smooth, copper over wood. Impossible to climb. A dead end in every direction. Well, this landed hard, like ice water down my spine. There was no escape from the tower. Not up, not down. I was here until I died. Either of thirst, of cold, or hunger. Or because they finally got through. I dropped back down and curled into my corner. My whole body shook now. It wasn't just the cold anymore. My throat burned with the need to scream. My eyes ached with tears I didn't want to give in to. I wanted this to be a nightmare. I wanted to wake up anywhere else. But instead, I hugged my knees to my chest, pressed my face into the feathers and filth, and waited. The pounding went on for hours. Sometimes it slowed to an irregular thud, long pauses between hits. But then it ramped back up harder than before. They never tired, never quit. They just kept throwing themselves at the door like time meant nothing to them. At some point, I must have passed out because I jolted awake to grey light leaking through the narrow windows. Pre-dawn. And the banging was gone. I was so cold I couldn't move at first. My hands felt dead, useless slabs at the ends of my arms. My face was stiff, skin stretched tight like frozen leather. I forced my fingers to bend, one joint at a time. Pain flared, sharp and electric, and then pins and needles as blood crept back in. My whole body ached from hours of violent shivering. But the tower was quiet now. Just the wind sliding through the open windows, making the stone hum. I crawled to the trapdoor and pressed my ear against it. Nothing. No movement, no sound. I waited. 5 minutes. 10. Still nothing. Slowly, carefully, I shifted the wood I'd piled on top and dragged the ladder aside. I slid the bolt back and lifted the trapdoor a few inches. The stairwell below was empty. Dim morning light filtered upward from the far below. For a split second, I wondered if the door at the bottom had been smashed open and sunlight was pouring in, but I didn't see any of them on the stairs. I raised the trapdoor higher and flicked on the flashlight. The beam was barely alive, so weak, but it showed stone steps spiraling down into darkness. Empty? Where had they gone? Closed the trapdoor again and shoved the bolt back into place. No chances. This could be bait. They could be waiting just out of sight, pressed against the walls. Or maybe they'd lost interest and wandered off to hunt something easier. I went to the windows. The parking lot below was mostly clear now. 5 or 6 infected remained, scattered and still, frozen in place like mannequins. But the rest were gone, dissolved back into the town. That was something, I guess. If most of them were gone, I had options. Maybe I could make a break for it, find a better shelter, find supplies, or maybe the second I opened that door, they had just come flooding back. I sat down and took 3 careful sips of water. The bottle was already half empty. I ate 1 pretzel, chewing it until it was paste, trying to trick my body into thinking it was more than it was. The salt made my mouth dry, but I needed the calories. The sun climbed over the eastern hills, spilling gold across the town. Smoke still rose from several places. In the daylight, I could see bodies in the streets now, dark shapes that didn't move. The truly dead, not the infected. There were dozens of them. I spent the morning watching. It was all I could do. Watch, wait, and look for patterns. The infected, still in the parking lot, barely moved now. They swayed where they stood, heads tilted at wrong angles. One of them was a woman in a business suit. Her blonde hair was matted dark with dried blood. She stood facing the street, unmoving, like she was waiting for a bus that would never come. Around 9, based on the sun's position, they started coming back. One here, one there, shamblers drifting in from different directions, drawn toward the church. Within an hour, the lot was crowded again. 20, 30, 40. They clustered close to the building, near the base of the tower, like they remembered I was up there even if they couldn't see me. I stayed away from the windows. I didn't want to give them a focal point. As the sun climbed, the temperature followed. Still cold, but survivable, maybe mid-40s. I wasn't shaking anymore, which felt like a victory. I spread the nesting material out to dry. It was damp from my breath and body heat. God, the tower stank. Wet bird, old stone, and my own sweat layered together. Then another problem hit me. I had to pee. There was no solution to that. No bathroom, no container. I used the corner farthest from where I slept, turning my back to the windows just in case one of them could somehow see up here. It was humiliating, but it had to happen. The urine soaked into the ancient wood and the smell joined everything else. Wiped my hands on my jeans, went back to my corner. Yeah, I'd live with it. By noon, I'd eaten 3 more pretzels. The bag was past half gone. My stomach twisted and grabbed at itself, sharp cramps rolling through, but I made myself stop. Took 2 small sips of water. The bottle felt light now, maybe a quarter full. I was rationing hard, but the numbers didn't care about discipline. 2 days of water if I was lucky. 3 days of food if I stretched it to the breaking point. And after that, nothing. The truth was I needed more supplies. Or I needed out. Those were the only 2 outcomes that didn't end with me dying up here. I spent the afternoon crawling over every inch of the tower. I'd already searched it once, but panic made me meticulous. I dragged my hands along the stone, feeling for hidden alcoves, old storage spaces, for anything hollow. Nothing. I inspected the bell frame inch by inch, hoping some long-gone maintenance worker had left a crate, a toolbox, for anything useful. All I found was dust, rot, and bird nest packed into the corners. Up close, the bells were ever more monstrous. The larger one stood maybe 4 feet tall, the smaller just under 3. Both hung from a thick oak beam anchored directly into the stone walls. The rope system was surprisingly clever. Pulleys, counterweights, all designed so a single person could ring both bells in rhythm. The ropes themselves were thick hemp, as wide as my chest, stiff with age and coated in grime and droppings. I gave one a cautious tug. The bell shifted slightly. The clapper swung just enough to kiss the bronze. Dun. The sound was soft, almost polite, but it made my blood freeze. I stood perfectly still, waiting for chaos below. A minute passed. Nothing changed. Either they didn't hear it or they didn't care. The ropes vanished through holes in the floor, following the spiral staircase down to where the ringing chamber would have been. Someone at ground level could have rung the bells without ever climbing the tower. That sparked an idea. Not a good one, but an idea. If I cut one of the ropes and dropped it out of a window, it'd be close to 80 feet long enough to reach the ground, or close enough to matter. I could tie it off to the bell frame and try to climb down the outside of the tower. Except I had nothing to cut it with. Matches wouldn't burn through the hemp that thick. I had no knife, no blade, and even if I did manage to cut it, could I climb 80 feet? I wasn't strong. I never worked out. My arms would give way halfway down and I'd fall and die anyway. Still, I was going to die of thirst up here. Might be worth the risk. Went back to the first aid kit and dumped it out again. Bandages, gauze, tape, antibiotic ointment, alcohol wipes. Oh, and a tiny pair of scissors. Part 3. They were barely 2 inches long, meant for trimming tape, not cutting rope. The blades were thin and dull. Pressed them against the hemp and tried to snip. Nothing. Barely fray the outer fibers. Cutting through even a single strand would take hours, maybe days. But it was possible, technically. I put the scissors back and locked the thought away. Not yet, but maybe. The afternoon crawled by. I was so bored it felt physical. Oh, there was nothing to do but watch the infected drift around below and count down the light. Tried to sleep, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I was exhausted and wired at the same time, running on fear and leftover adrenaline. Too tired to move, too tense to rest. My thoughts drifted to my apartment, my books, my laptop. TV I used as background noise. Oh, my job at the insurance company. Mind-numbing but stable. Co-workers, Friday drinks at the pub, trivia nights on Tuesdays, my regular Chinese takeout order, Kung Pao chicken, extra spicy fried rice. All of it was gone, wiped out. The world had ended and I was hiding in a bell tower, eating stale pretzels and pissing on a wooden floor. God, how did it come to this? That question circled endlessly with no answer waiting at the end. The news had been a mess even before it went dark. One channel said virus, another swore it was a bioweapon. A preacher screamed about divine judgment. Online the theories multiplied by the minute until the internet itself vanished. Now there was no way to know the truth. Not that it mattered. Whatever caused it didn't change the outcome. The dead were walking and everyone I knew was probably dead, or worse. I cut that line of thought off hard. Letting my mind sink into that hole wouldn't keep me alive. As the sun slid down again, I got ready for another night. I dragged the nesting junk back into a heap. I repositioned the water bottle and food so I could grab them blind. I checked the trapdoor. It was still bolted, still braced with a ladder and stacked wood. I pulled on every layer I had, jacket over hoodie, trying to trap heat any way I could. The air was cooling fast. It was going to be another brutal night. I started hitting the door around 8. Same rhythm as before. Steady, patient, unstoppable. I tried to tune it out, but the sound climbed the tower and drilled straight into my skull. Every impact was rattling my teeth. God, I wanted to scream at them to shut up, but I didn't. That would only make it worse. Instead, I curled into my corner and clamped my hands over my ears. I dragged up anything I could think of to drown it out. Poems I'd memorized in high school, song lyrics I hadn't thought about in years. Counted backward from 1,000. Missed numbers, started again. The banging went on until I guessed it was midnight. The stars overhead suggested it was late. And then, just like the night before, it stopped. Dead silence. Only the wind. I was exhausted down to my bones. I was cold. I was hungry. I burrowed into the feathers and shut my eyes. Sleep came eventually, dragging me under whether I wanted it or not. Day 3 began the same way Day 2 had. Grey dawn, frozen fingers, empty lot. But something was different. It was quieter. When I checked the windows, I counted only 3 infected nearby. Just 3. The rest had drifted off somewhere else, pulled by some instinct I still didn't understand. This was it. Yes, if I was going to try to get out, it had to be now. I spent an hour thinking it through. The door at the bottom of the stairs had to be open or broken, otherwise how were they getting inside to slam against it every night? If I could get down the stairs and through that door before the others wandered back, I might have a shot. Find a car, pray the keys were inside, drive until I hid help or ran out of road. Well, it was a terrible plan. There were dozens of ways to die, but staying meant dying for sure. I drank the rest of the water. Every drop. Yeah, if I was running, dehydration would kill me faster than anything else. I ate the last of the pretzels, 4 sad little twists that tasted like salt and dust. Wasn't enough, nowhere near enough. I stuffed the first aid kit and the matches into my jacket pockets. I left the flashlight behind. The batteries were useless. I left the notepad and pen. No more goodbyes. I wrapped the rusted chain around my hand, letting it dangle like a crude flail. It was a weapon, barely, but better than empty hands. Well, this was as ready as I was ever going to be. I pulled the wood off the trapdoor and dragged the ladder away. I slid the bolt back, and slowly, carefully, I lifted the door and looked down. Empty. Spiral stairs dropped away into shadow. I could see the bottom. The door was there, hanging open, torn loose from its hinges. Morning light poured through it, bright and unforgiving. Right, this was the moment. I eased myself through the trapdoor, my boots finding stone. My ankle still flared with pain, swollen and stiff from days ago, but it held. I started down, slowly and silently, sticking to the outer edge of the spiral where the steps were widest. The stairway was narrow, barely enough room for my shoulders. The stone walls were cold and damp, slick to the touch. The steps were worn smooth in the center, polished by centuries of feet climbing up and down. Now it was just mine. Oh, and whatever was waiting below. I counted the steps as I descended. 10, 20, 30. At 40, something moved below me. A scrape, a wet, dragging breath. I stopped dead. There was one in the stairwell. At least one. Somewhere beneath me, hidden in the curve of the spiral. I held my breath until my chest burned and listened. The sound came again. It was closer now, unmistakably below, or maybe 20 feet down past the next bend. I had 2 choices. Back up, retreat to the tower and wait it out. Or push forward and try to get past it. If it was only one, maybe I could take it. I tightened my grip on the chain, imagining the weight of it cracking a skull. Well, I knew the rules. Smash the brain, end it. But this wasn't a movie. This was real. Whatever was down there had once been human. It was strong, it didn't feel pain, and if I got close enough to swing the chain, it was close enough for it to grab me. My hands were shaking. Cold? Fear? probably both. I took one careful step down, and then another. The stone didn't make a sound under my sneakers. I reached the next curve and leaned just enough to see. It was Father Val, or what remained of him. He sat slumped on the steps, back against the wall, head twisted at an angle no neck should allow. His throat was gone, just a torn cavity crusted with dried black blood. His eyes were open, clouded over, useless and watching at the same time. His hands rested on his knees, fingers twitching in small, nervous spasms. He blocked the stairs completely. There was no squeezing past him in that tight spiral. As I stared, his head snapped toward me. Not smooth, just sharp, like a bird jerking to attention. His mouth fell open and the sound came out again, wet and bubbling through the ruined mess of his throat. He saw me. He unfolded himself off the steps and surged upright with that awful liquid motion that they all had, joints bending where they shouldn't, body moving too easily. He started climbing toward me, arms reaching, mouth opening wider. I ran. Tore back up the stairs, taking them two at a time, pain exploding through my ankles. Behind me, he was coming faster than he had any right to. I could hear him, those wet breaths, the shoes scraping the stone, always too close. I tore through the trapdoor and spun, slamming it down just as his hand shot through the gap. Grey fingers, blackened nails, grasping. I grabbed the ladder and drove it down onto his arm. Wood crunched against flesh and bone, but he didn't recoil. No, he just kept reaching, clawing for my leg like nothing was wrong. I swung the chain. Once, twice, 3 times. The skin split, but no red came out, just this dark sludge seeping over my knuckles. On the 4th strike, something gave way. Bone or tendon snapped, and the hand went slack. I kicked the arm back through and slammed the trapdoor shut. Threw the bolt, jammed the ladder across it. From below he moaned and scratched and scraped at the wood. God, he was right there, just inches away, separated from me by a thin layer of planks. I staggered back and collapsed into my corner. My lungs were on fire now, and my ankle throbbed like it had been shattered. The chain was still wrapped around my hand, slick with that dark, oily fluid. Well, that was it. No escape. I was trapped for real now. The stairwell was lost. Father Val was down there and more would come. The door at the bottom was wide open. They could move in and out freely, fill the stairs and wait me out. Thirst would finish the job if nothing else did. I wanted to cry, but my body couldn't spare the water. My eyes burned dry. I sat there for a long time, breathing, trying to steady myself while the scratching continued below. So slow and so methodical. Eventually, I forced myself to move. If I was going to die, it wouldn't be because I'd given up. I reinforced the trapdoor, piled everything I could find on top of it. Every piece of wood, the chain, chunks of the bell framework I'd managed to wrench loose. I built a barricade out of desperation and fear, knowing the thing below me would never get tired. But neither could I. I built the barricade until it stood nearly 3 feet high, a crooked mound of broken wood, splintered beams, twisted metal, and whatever weight I could drag across the floor. It wasn't pretty. It didn't have to be. It was heavy, brutal, and stubborn. He wasn't going to push through that, I hoped. After that, the day dissolved. I sat with my back against the wall and stared at nothing. Too empty to move, too beaten to think. The hunger gnawed constantly now. It was a dull, relentless ache. But the thirst was worse. The thirst was torture. My mouth felt stuffed with cotton. My tongue was thick and swollen. I hadn't had water in hours, and my body was screaming for it in waves of panic and nausea. I even thought about drinking my own piss. I knew people did it in survival situations. I'd read about it. But knowing and doing were different things. I couldn't make myself try, not yet. I told myself maybe tomorrow, if tomorrow came, and if I was worse than this. The sun went down in a blaze of red, angry light. It smeared the stone walls in blood colours like the tower itself was bleeding. I watched from the west window and felt nothing at all. No fear, no sadness, just a flat, hollow acceptance. The night fell, and the scratching never stopped. Father Val worked at the trapdoor all night, scraping, clawing, moaning softly to himself. He didn't rest, didn't even pause. He didn't tie, just waited me out with the patience of something that was not alive. I didn't sleep either. I couldn't. I was too cold, too thirsty, too aware of my body shutting down piece by piece. Dawn crawled in, grey and miserable. Was this day 4? Maybe 5. I wasn't sure anymore. Time had lost all meaning. When I stood, the room tilted. Black spots swam in my vision. My head felt full of pressure, like it might split open. Oh yeah, the dehydration had sunk its teeth in deep. I remembered reading that humans could last 3 days without water, 4 if they were lucky. I was past that line, or standing right on it. I needed water. I thought about rain. If it rained, I could catch it somehow, tear pages from the notepad, shape them into a crude funnel, let the water drip into my mouth. But the sky was a hard, empty blue. No clouds, no mercy. I looked at the bells. Bronze was metal, and metal sweated. Early morning cold air against warming air. There should be condensation. I dragged myself up the ladder and pressed my face close to the larger bell. The surface wasn't wet enough to drip, but it was damp, coated in a thin, shining film. I ran a finger across it and licked it. The taste was awful. Metal, birchit, old dust. But it was water. I did it again, and again. I ran both hands over every inch I could reach and licked the moisture from my palms like an animal. God, it wasn't much. Maybe a tablespoon when I was done. But it was something. Enough to keep me alive 1 more day. I repeated the process on the smaller bell. Another miserable tablespoon. Well, my mouth eased slightly. The dizziness backed off just enough to matter. It could work. Every morning I could harvest the condensation. Well, it wouldn't be enough, never enough, but maybe it would keep me breathing, barely. Unless the weather changed. Unless it got warmer. Unless 100 other things went wrong. But at least for that day I had water. And below me the scratching continued. Father Val never stopped. Part 4. I wondered if any part of him was still in there. Trapped, or where? Watching through dead eyes as his body clawed and moaned on autopilot. Fuck, I hope not. I hoped it was just infection and instinct. Nothing left to suffer. The day passed in a fog. I drifted in and out of half sleep, never fully resting, never fully awake. My thoughts came apart. My dreams made no sense. I was back in my apartment, but the walls were stone. I was at work, but everyone was dead. I was in the bell tower, and my dad was there, pointing out constellations like nothing was wrong. When I woke again, the sun was low. Hours had gone by. My hunger had changed. The sharp cramps were gone, replaced by a deep, hollow emptiness, like something vital had been snooped out of me. My body had started eating itself, I guess. Fat first, muscle next. Well, people could survive weeks without food, they said. I didn't have weeks. Oh, fuck, I was already weak, already damaged by cold, fear, and thirst. I needed food. The pigeons. They used to live up here. I hadn't seen them since the first day when everything had gone to hell, and they'd exploded out of the tower in a frenzy of wings, but birds came back to familiar places. They roosted at sunset. If one returned, I could catch it, kill it, eat it, roar if I had to. The thought made my stomach twist, but hunger was louder than disgust now. Protein was protein, calories were calories. I watched the windows as evening crept in. The sky turned orange, then purple. Stars began punching through the dark. Oh, it was beautiful. Then movement. A flutter at the north window. Pigeon landed on the stone still, grey and white, plump and dumb. It didn't move. I barely breathed. The bird hopped inside, pecking at the floor. It's about 6 feet away. I had one chance. If I missed, it would be gone forever. I waited until it lowered its head again, and then I lunged. My hand snapped shut around the pigeon's body and it detonated into chaos. Wings hammered my face, feathers exploded into the air. Its claws raked my forearms. They were sharp and desperate, and I tightened my grip. It was stronger than I expected. Warm, alive, I could feel its heart smashing itself to pieces against my palms. I squeezed harder. I had to end it fast or it would slip free. I twisted its neck the way I'd seen people do it on screens, pretending it was easy. Something cracked, and the bird went slack instantly. I sat there shaking. Fuck. I just killed something. Something small and breathing and heartless. I knew I needed to do it, but the guilt still hit me like a wave of filth. I stared down at the dead pigeon lying in my lap, its head hanging at an unnatural angle. Now what? I had no idea how to prepare an animal. Never cleaned anything bigger than a fish fillet wrapped in plastic. Didn't have a knife, no tools, just my hands and the pathetic little scissors from the first aid kit. So, I used my fingers. I tore at the feathers, ripping them out in greasy handfuls. They came free easier than I'd expected, drifting down to join the mess already covering the floor. The skin underneath was pale and bumpy. I split it open with my nails. It resisted. It was tougher than it looked, but then gave way. Heat spilled out. The inside was disgusting. I reached in and pulled out organs I couldn't name, dropping them onto the stone. And then the smell hit me full in the face, raw, coppery, unmistakably recently alive. God, this was savage. I was crouched in a bell tower, dismantling a bird with my bare hands like something prehistoric. But hunger drowned out the shame. I tore into the breast meat with my teeth. It was stringy, grey. It tasted like blood and iron. I chewed anyway, and swallowed, and took another bite, then another. I ate until there was nothing left but bones, feathers, and wet scraps I couldn't force myself to touch. It wasn't enough. One pigeon might be several hundred calories if I was lucky. My body needed 10 times more than that. More with the cold chewing at me non-stop. But still, it was something. I wiped my hands on my jeans, streaking them dark. Sat there for a long time afterward, staring at nothing, stunned by what I'd just done. And I was alive. Night came, and the scratching started again below. I curled up in my filthy nest of feathers. My feathers now mixed with the pigeons. I tried to sleep. Tomorrow, I told myself, I'd lick water from the bells again. Tomorrow, I'd try to catch another bird. Tomorrow, I'd survive one more day. That became the rule. One fucking day at a time. The days smeared together until counting them felt pointless. A week had passed, maybe more, and every day was the same loop. Wake cold and stiff, scrape moisture off bronze with my tongue, watch the windows, listen to Father Val claw at the door, sleep in broken pieces, and repeat. I caught 3 more pigeons, but it was never enough. My body shrank fast. My jeans sagged at the waist, my ribs stood out when I looked down. My reflection in the curved bronze of the bells barely looked human now. God, my eyes were sunken, hollow cheeks, skin pulled tight and pale. I was slowly dying. Below, the infected thinned out again. Most days, only a few lingered in the parking lot, motionless, waiting. The rest wandered the town, drifting through streets and buildings in patterns I couldn't understand. The fires had burned down to embers. The smoke had cleared. I could see further now. The highway to the south was a solid mass of dead cars. The strip mall was a black shell. The elementary school's flag still flew, but it was torn and faded, snapping weakly in the wind. There were no helicopters, no soldiers, no rescue. I was alone. The isolation was worse than the hunger had ever been. I started talking to myself just to hear a voice. I held conversations with people who weren't there. I told my dad about the stars at night. I described the sunrise to my mom in detail, like she could still see it through my eyes. And I screamed at Father Val through the trapdoor, told him to leave, to stop, to just let me die in peace. Well, he never answered. He just scratched. I knew I was losing my mind. I could feel it happening, slowly and steadily. I remembered reading about solitary confinement, how people unraveled when cut off long enough. Well, I was living it. One morning I woke up and couldn't remember my own name. Not for several long, terrifying minutes at least. When it came back, it hit me like a slap. Don. My name was Don Chen, 32 years old, insurance adjuster. That scared me more than the infected ever had. I was disappearing. Well, to fight it, I started writing. The notepad and pen was still there, and I filled page after page with whatever I could drag out of my head. My address, my phone number, my mom's birthday, my first grade teacher's name, the plot of my favorite book, anything to nail myself in place. I wrote about the infected, about the bells, about the cold, about the pigeons. I wrote letters to people who would never read them. Dear Mom, I'm alive. I'm in the bell tower of St. Catherine's Church. I hope you made it out. Hope Nebraska was far enough away. Hope you and Karen are together and safe. I miss you. Love, Dawn. There was no one left to send it to, but writing it made the silence hurt a little less. And then the weather turned. One morning I woke up to snow drifting through the open windows, dusting the floor in white. The air burned my lungs. Winter had arrived. I had no fire, no heat, no shelter beyond stone and wind. That was it. This was how it ended. Not torn apart, not eaten alive, not starved, but frozen in a bell tower, scratching sounds below, snow falling softly around me. I told myself I'd fall asleep one night and simply never wake up, freeze solid in my pile of feathers and be done with it. The idea didn't scare me as much as it should have. It sounded quiet, final, clean ending, I suppose. But something in me refused to roll over and die. Some stubborn, feral scrap of instinct kept digging in its heels. I gathered more nesting debris and rebuilt my corner, thicker this time, tighter. I forced my body to move, jumping jacks, push-ups, anything that would spark heat. God, my muscles screamed and gave out fast, but it was enough to warm me for a while. I wrapped the chain around my torso under my clothes, the cold metal stealing heat at first and then holding it close once it had warmed. I made it through another night, then another. The snow stopped falling, but the cold never loosened its grip. I could see my breath all the time now, pale clouds blooming in front of my face. Frost crept across the inside of the windows like veins. Some mornings the condensation on the bells was frozen solid. I had to press my hands against the bronze, wait for my body heat to soften it, and then scrape and lick it off like an animal. I caught another pigeon, then another. I got better at it, quieter, faster. The hesitation had disappeared, the guilt burned out. They were food, nothing more. Survival burned morality down to ash. I used the tiny scissors to slice thin strips of meat and then drape them over the bell ropes to dry. Pigeon jerky. Revolting, but it kept longer. I rationed it with grim precision, eating just enough to keep my body from shutting down. This was my life now. This was what I turned into. A scavenger squatting in a stone tower, killing birds with my hands, licking water off metal, talking to myself while something dead scratched at the door below. Time dragged forward inch by inch. I marked the days on the wall with charcoal scraped from burned matches. 23 lines now, almost a month. It didn't feel real, but it felt endless. My body adapted in ugly ways. Hunger never left, but I learned to ignore it. My hands were rough with calluses and scars from feathers, bone, and claws. My ankle had mostly healed, though it screamed when the temperature dropped. My beard grew wild and knotted, and I stank. Sweat, old blood, and rot. I was still alive. But I was becoming something else. Then the scratching stopped. It just ended. 3 days passed with nothing from below. No moaning, no claws on wood, no patient eternal noise. I didn't know if Father Val had wandered off, collapsed, or simply wore himself down to nothing. And to be honest, the silence was worse. I'd grown used to the sound. It had kept me sharp, and without it, the tower felt wrong. It was just too empty and too still. But I finally cracked the trapdoor and looked down. The stairwell was empty. No Father Val, no infected, just shadows, stone, and the broken door at the bottom spilling grey winter light into the shaft. This was another chance. Another opening. But God, I was weak now. I didn't trust my legs to carry all the way down without folding. And even if I made it outside, then what? Run on shaking limbs? Fight with arms that barely lifted my own weight? Oh, I'd die out there. Up here I had stone walls, a little water, a few pigeons. It wasn't life, but it was survival. I closed the trapdoor and bolted it again. Maybe later. Maybe never. And the next morning I woke to voices. Human voices. At first I thought my brain had finally snapped, but they kept going. Clear, layered, real. They floated up from outside, carried on the cold air. I scrambled to the north window and looked down. There were people in the parking lot. Living people. 5 of them, 3 men, 2 women. Rifles, baseball bats, heavy winter gear, backpacks. They moved tight and disciplined. Survivors. Oh, my chest locked up. I wanted to scream, but fear crushed it back down. What if they weren't friendly? What if they saw me as a liability? Or worse, as infected? I watched them approach the church. A tall man with a red beard tried the door. It was locked. They talked briefly, then split up, checking the building. They were going to leave. They'd search, find nothing useful, and disappear forever. They'd never know I was even here. I couldn't let that happen. I tried to shout, but my voice came out shredded and weak. Barely anything. Help! Nothing. I tried again, louder, my voice cracking. Up here! The wind swallowed it. At this point, desperation took over. I grabbed the chain and slammed it against the bell. The sound detonated across the parking lot, pure, violent, and impossible to ignore. They all froze. Their heads snapped up. One of them pointed straight at me. I waved like a madman, arms flailing. God, I was alive. I was here. The red-bearded man said something sharp to the others. Then they moved toward the tower entrance. God, hope hit me so hard it hurt. After all this time, after all of it, I was going to be rescued. You know what, I'm really glad that worked out for him. I think he deserved a break after all was said and done. Never been up a church tower as far as I can recall, but that video is from the local church near where I live, which was actually financed by Mussolini, would you believe? Yeah, the local Catholics didn't have enough money, so they got in touch with Mussolini back in the day and said, hey, Mussolini, give us some money to build a Catholic church. And he stumped up. So, yeah, a little bit of local history from Maastricht there for you. So, yeah, very delighted to be back working on the zombie stories again. It's been a while. Lots more are promised from the author, so let's see how that goes. Anyway, that's enough for this cold, very miserable, actually, in the minus degrees here in the Netherlands. Very cold and miserable. Trains had closed down. The airports are almost closed in Amsterdam. And we're just kind of like hunkering down, waiting for it to pass. Supposed to be travelling for work tomorrow, and probably won't be able to get there because there won't be a train. Anyway, that's on the plus side, I guess. Anyway, waffling off on a bit here. Back again tomorrow night with a podcast, and back here on Friday with something else wonderful, I hope. Until then, my dear friends, just remember, it's only a story and you all sleep well, yeah? Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.